Is there anyone who would like to lead the kirtan? Otherwise, I'm prepared to do so.
Please go ahead, Mataji.
Okay. Just take 1 second here to close some windows so it's not confusing. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotara Sata Sri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mayi Ki Jai Jamuna Mayi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Thank you very much, Tulsi Priya, for your kirtan and for posting the Mangal Arti of Krishna Balaram in Vrindavan. And welcome everyone for Sri Caitanya Caritamrta with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj and friends. It is Thursday, December 7th, 2023 in the Western Hemisphere. And we're in the 7th chapter of the Adi Leela, Caitanya Caritamrita. And Hare Krishna. And we had some notes from last time, but they don't give me the full picture of exactly where we are. I believe we started on verse 98, and then at the end of the class, Dana Mataji posted a link for verse 102. And one of those verses, maybe in between the two of those verses, had a copious amount of Sanskrit prose in it, courtesy of Srila Jiva Goswami. So I would be happy to know exactly where we are, because I don't know.
We covered text 102. We covered text 102. We didn't go fully into discussion of that purport. There's a purport within a purport for text 102. I believe that's where we stopped. Does anyone have any?
Yeah, Maharaj confirmed.
Maharaj says 102 reviewing. Next is 103. Yes.
Yeah. I was going to ask if it would be possible tonight for Surabhi Kunj Mataji to monitor the chat window, because our dear friend Panchatattva Prabhu has been to the dentist today. So that would be really nice. Thank you so much.
Was bent at the dentist. That's correct.
Oh, Hare Krishna. So we can say Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So let's see where we are in text 102, if we haven't covered the whole thing or if we're still going through the purport.
We are still going through the purport. There wasn't much said on the purport, and there's a lot there.
So let us then, let me see this.
Maharaj says, I think we finished reading it, but decided we should review it.
Yes, yes.
I'm scrolling fiercely just even to get where we are here. Hare Krishna. All right. So. Oh, I see. Yes, the purport within the purport. Okay. So would it make sense for us to begin with the text again and progress through it? Because I don't know where we are in the purport at all.
Well, we really, as Mara said, we really didn't do much in the way of commenting on the purport, commenting on the commentary at all, or raising questions or anything. We read it, but that's where it ended. We ran out of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it is a long purport. Not so long, not very long. All right. So Hare Krishna. Well, who would like to dive in and read either the text or the purport? I'm not sure what Maharaj says. The beginning of the purport establishes, in essence, that Krishna consciousness rests on solid Vedanta philosophy. Right. I'll read the Bengali and the translation, and then we can discuss the purport. I'm sure we all can find something to say about it. Eta shunihasi prabhu balila vachana dukhanama nahayadi kari nivedana. After hearing the Mayavadi sannyasis speak in that way, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu smiled slightly and said, "My dear sirs, if you don't mind, I can say something to you regarding Vedanta philosophy." Panchatattva Prabhu, are you well enough to read a paragraph of the purport?
Sure. I've got a nice wad of gauze in my mouth, but I'll be happy to read it. Purport. The Mayavadi sannyasis appreciating Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inquired from him why he did not discuss Vedanta philosophy. Actually, however, the entire system of Vaishnava activities is based on Vedanta philosophy. Vaishnavas do not neglect Vedanta, but they do not care to understand Vedanta on the basis of the Shariraka commentary. Therefore, to clarify the situation, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, with the permission of the Mayavadi sannyasis, wanted to speak regarding Vedanta philosophy. The Vaishnavas are by far the greatest philosophers in the world, and the greatest among them was Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhu, whose philosophy was again presented less than 400 years later by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj. Therefore, one must know very well that Vaishnava philosophers are not sentimentalists or cheap devotees like the Sahajas. All the Vaishnava acharyas were vastly learned scholars who understood Vedanta philosophy fully. For unless one knows Vedanta philosophy, he cannot be an acharya. To be accepted as an acharya among Indian transcendentalists who follow the Vedic principles, one must become a vastly learned scholar in Vedanta philosophy, either by studying it or hearing it. Should I continue or someone else read? What do you want again, Prabhu?
Well, let's see. Who else would like to read? Tulsi Priya, Saraswati, Shara. Someone else can pick up. I hate to have the dental patient continue.
I don't mind. It's really nectarine.
Well, then.
Bhakti develops in pursuance of Vedanta philosophy. This is stated in Srimad-Bhagavatam 1.2.12. Tat Shradadhana Muniyo Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya Pasyantyatmani Chatmanam Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya. The words Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya in this verse are very important, for they indicate that bhakti must be based upon the philosophy of the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra. Srila Rupa Goswami said, Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidhim Vina Aikantiki Harir Bhaktir Utpataya Eva Kolpate. Devotional service performed without reference to the Vedas, Puranas, Pancharatras, etc., must be considered sentimentalism, and it causes nothing but disturbance to society, unquote. There are different grades of Vaishnavas, Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. But to be a Madhyama Adhikari preacher, one must be a learned scholar in the Vedanta Sutra and other Vedic literatures, because when Bhakti Yoga develops on the basis of Vedanta philosophy, it is factual and steady. In this connection, we may quote the translation and purport of the verse mentioned above, Srimad-Bhagavatam 1.2.12. Anyone else? Translation: the seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes the absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. Purport: the absolute truth is realized in full by the process of devotional service to the Lord, Vasudeva, or the personality of Godhead, who is the full-fledged absolute truth. Brahman is his transcendental bodily effulgence, and Paramatma is his partial representation. As such, Brahman or Paramatma realization of the absolute truth is but a partial realization. There are four different types of human beings: the karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, and the devotees. The karmis are materialistic, whereas the other three are transcendental. The first-class transcendentalists are the devotees, who have realized the Supreme Person. The second-class transcendentalists are those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the absolute truth, or absolute person, And the third-class transcendentalists are those who have barely realized the spiritual focus of the absolute person. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, the Supreme Person is realized by devotional service, which is backed by full knowledge and detachment from material association. We've already discussed the point that devotional service is followed by knowledge and detachment from material association. As Brahman and Paramatma realization are imperfect realizations of the absolute truth, so the means of realizing Brahman and Paramatma, id est, the paths of Jnana and Yoga, are also imperfect means of realizing the absolute truth. Devotional service, which is based on the foreground of full knowledge combined with detachment from material association, and which is fixed by dint of the oral reception of the Vedanta Shruti, is the only perfect method by which the seriously inquisitive student can realize the absolute truth. Devotional service is not, therefore, meant for the less intelligent class of transcendentalists. There are three classes of devotees, namely first, second, and third class. The third class devotees, or the neophytes, who have no knowledge and are not detached from material association, but who are simply attracted by the preliminary process of worshiping the deity in the temple, are called material devotees. Material devotees are more attached to material benefit than transcendental profit. Therefore, one has to make definite progress from the position of material devotional service to the second-class devotional position. In the second-class position, the devotee can see four principles in the devotional line, namely the personality of Godhead, his devotees, the ignorant, and the envious. One has to raise himself at least to the stage of a second-class devotee and thus become eligible to know the absolute truth. A third-class devotee, therefore, has to receive the instructions of devotional service from the authoritative sources of Bhagavat. The number one Bhagavata is the established personality of devotee, and the other Bhagavata is the message of Godhead. The third-class devotee, therefore, has to go to the personality of devotee in order to learn the instructions of devotional service. Such a personality of devotee is not a professional man who earns his livelihood by the business of the Bhagavatam. Such a devotee must be a representative of Shukadev Goswami, like Sutta Goswami, and must preach the cult of devotional service for the all-around benefit of all people. A neophyte devotee has very little taste for hearing from the authorities. Such a neophyte devotee makes a show of hearing from the professional man to satisfy his senses. This sort of hearing and chanting has spoiled the whole thing, so one should be very careful about the faulty process. The holy messages of Godhead, as inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita or in Srimad-Bhagavatam, are undoubtedly transcendental subjects, but even though they are so, such transcendental matters are not to be received from the professional man who spoils them as the serpent spoils milk simply by the touch of his tongue. A sincere devotee must therefore be prepared to hear the Vedic literature, like the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, and other literatures left by the previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress. And without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of devotional service. Unless, therefore, devotional service is established on the principles of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Pancharatra authorities, the make-show of devotional service should at once be rejected. An unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as a pure devotee. By assimilation of such messages from the Vedic literatures, one can see the all-pervading localized aspect of the personality of Godhead within his own self constantly. This is called samadhi. Om Jnanatmarandasya Gananjana Sattva Chakshomritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Very powerful purport within a purport. Right away, Prabhupada establishes in his purport that Vaishnavas, acharyas, are not sentimentalists, they're not uneducated, they know the Vedanta. It kind of bewilders me a little bit that the Mayavadis or the Mayavadi impersonalists can look at the likes of Vishnu Swami, Ramanujacharya, and so forth, and think they don't know Vedanta. These were all highly advanced souls. What to speak of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which they're going to find out shortly. So, but somehow or other, by the covering of Maya, they dismiss the vast body of knowledge and realization of the Vaishnavacharyas and the four Sampradayas as being something off the mark or in the wrong direction, or even missing the point entirely of Vedanta. They've gone so far in the direction of impersonalism, even though it's described here in the purport as being a partial understanding, that they reject all other information, which can take them beyond that level. How is it described here? They're like Where is it? It's in the purport within the purport. Anyway, if someone can find it. Here. As Brahman and Paramatma realization are imperfect realizations of the absolute truth, so the means of realizing Brahman and Paramatma, as the paths of Jnana and Yoga, are also imperfect means of realizing the absolute truth. They're imperfect, but perfect means to know, to perfectly know something means to know it, all of it, not just part of it. They know part of it. And the Mayavadis know, to some degree, part of it and reject the rest of it. It's an unfortunate position. But this, the next sentence is very interesting. Devotional service, which is based on the foreground of full knowledge, combined with detachment from material association, which is fixed by dint of the oral reception of the Vedanta Shruti, is the only perfect method by which the seriously inquisitive student can realize the absolute truth. And then Prabhupada says, therefore, devotional service isn't meant for less intelligent class of transcendentalists, namely the Jnanis and the mystic yogis. But then I have a question. At the end of the purport, it's said, by assimilating such messages of the Vedic literatures, one can see the all-pervading localized aspect of the personality of Godhead. That would be the supersoul, right? Paramatma. Within his own self constantly. This is called samadhi. So my understanding is that goal of the mystic yogis is automatically attained by someone who has assimilated these messages. Assimilating meaning acting according to those messages also in their life. And then they can realize the Paramatma within the heart, and what to speak of the Supreme Personality of God. But it's interesting that Prabhupada makes this particular emphasis. One can see the all-pervading localized aspect of the personality of Godhead within his own self constantly. I'd love to hear Maharaj's take on that statement. And of course, in this purport, there's also a nice explanation of who a third-class devotee is, who a second-class devotee is, and who a first-class devotee is. And with Prabhupada stressing that one has to come at least to the second-class position. And the second-class position has a very strong definition. Where is it here? That they're fully conversant with the Vedanta Shruti, the second-class devotee. I should be able to immediately spot it, and I can't. No, it's not it.
Is it the second class transcendentalists or those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the absolute person?
There was an even stronger statement. Why am I not seeing it? Jeez, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. I was right. I just read it on a Kali Yuga brain.
In the second class position, the devotee can see four principles in the devotional line, namely the personality of Godhead, his devotees, the ignorant, and the envious.
I'm looking for it.
Sorry.
No, that's good. Anyway, I'll find it. Is there anything else?
Maharaj says,
Yes,
I
good.
was just looking in the old Srimad-Bhagavatam to see what it says, and it's identical. Srila Prabhupada is glossing Pasyantyam Atmani Chatmanam. He can see the Supreme Atma within himself.
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada's word for word glosses Atmanam as the Paramatma. So that accounts for what we see in the purport. Saraswati Mataji says, Pranams, I thought the stage of Samadhi was achieved only by Mahabhagavat devotees. Also, Mayavadis want to be God, so any other philosophy that goes against this goal is dismissed, unacceptable, and argued for the sake of argument, even though solid evidence to the contrary is presented by Vaishnava Acharyas. They don't want to be a servitor.
The reason I wasn't finding that was because I kept going to this wonderful second purport within purport. It's right at the end of Prabhupada's purport before beginning the Bhagavad 1-12 reference. There are different grades of Vaishnavas, Kanishta Adhikari, Majjhima Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. But to be a Majjhima Adhikari preacher, one must be a learned scholar in the Vedanta Sutra and other Vedic literatures, because when Bhakti Yoga develops on the basis of Vedanta philosophy, it is factual and steady. And then in that connection, he quotes this purport. So that's an interesting requisite for being a Majjhima Adhikari Vaishnava. You really have to know the philosophy, specifically a Majjhima Adhikari preacher of Krishna consciousness. You really have to know the philosophy. A learned scholar, Prabhupada says. Does anyone want to address Saraswati Dasi's comment? Maharaj says Samadhi, not only the Mahabhagavats. Samadhi means, Maharaj says, fixed mind. Even the impersonalists attain a kind of samadhi. But the devotees more directly, Maharaj says. Thank you, Maharaj. Anything else on this amazing purport?
I was struck by the idea of the material devotees being the worshippers of the deity in the temple, because so many devotees I know of, they're very advanced, and that's their ecstasy, is to do deity worship. But also many of them are preachers. But even so, even if they're not so much preachers, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around them being third-class devotees, because their seva is so wonderful, so powerful. You go into the temple and you're instantly transported. Even if you don't hear the philosophy, something's happening to you when you see the deities and when you're in the temple environment. So it's a little difficult for me to understand that.
I think, well, you have to take the whole picture of a neophyte or first, third class Vaishnava. That they are also, as is mentioned here, they're more or less attached to fruitive activities. They can become, and other places it's described that they become attracted to the deity worship in the temple, but they don't understand the position of the Vaishnavas and so forth. And so and their hearts are still materialistic. But I'm sure that there are many devotees who've engaged for, what to speak of a short time, a long time in the work in the service of the deity, who are much more than beginners or neophytes in Krishna consciousness.
Maharaj says Kanishta Adhikaris are defined as seeing only themselves and the deity.
Yeah.
And Saraswati Mataji says, so often we see at Sunday feast, as soon as Aarti is over and Bhagavatam class is about to start, they leave the temple.
People go to ask something of the deity, and then when the Bhagavatam class comes, that's when the deity is asking something of you, and I guess they don't want to hear it.
You want to read the other ones, the other comments?
Maharaj says, therefore they're called Prakrita Bhaktas. And Ekendra Prabhu says, I find humor in Lord Chaitanya's colossal understatement. My dear sir, if you don't mind, I can say something to you regarding Vedanta philosophy, because he certainly can.
A good one. Colossal understatement. Anyone else? Kendra Prabhu, should we move on to the next verse?
Good idea.
Who wants to read? Surabhi Kunj, you sound like you're able to read. Would you like to read?
Okay.
Okay.
Iha sunivale sarva sanyasira gana toma make dekhiya yache shakshat narayana. Hearing this, the Mayavadi sannyasis became somewhat humble and addressed Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Narayan himself, who they all agreed he was. Mayavadi sannyasis address each other as Narayan. Whenever they see another sannyasi, they offer him respect by calling Om Namo Narayana. I offer my respect unto you, Narayan, although they know perfectly well what kind of Narayan he is. Narayan has 4 hands, but although they are puffed up with the idea of being Narayan, they cannot exhibit more than 2. Since their philosophy declares that Narayan and an ordinary human being are on the same level, they sometimes use the term Daridra Narayan, poor Narayan, which was invented by a so-called Swami who did not know anything about Vedanta philosophy. Therefore, although all these Mayavadi sannyasis who called themselves Narayan were actually unaware of the position of Narayan, due to their austerities, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu enabled them to understand him to be Narayan himself. Lord Chaitanya is certainly the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan appearing as a devotee of Narayan, and thus the Mayavadi sannyasis, understanding that he was directly Narayan himself, whereas they were false, puffed up Narayans, spoke to him as follows.
Any comments?
Oh, Maharaj says, regarding sannyasis addressing one another as Narayan, I'd never seen this before I went to Haridwar for the Kumbh Mela sometime perhaps in the 1980s. There are so many sannyasis addressed even me with Namo Narayana.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
How were the sannyasis able to recognize Mahaprabhu as Narayan? Did he just bestow the understanding on them, or was there something in them that they had, I don't know, previous pious activities or something like that, and then seeing Mahaprabhu was the catalyst and they were able to realize it?
That's a good question. He did display an effulgence when he when he entered the building. It was quite uncommon and extraordinary, something that none of them were doing, obviously. So that probably was a clue. They also had he was present before them. Can you imagine? The Supreme Personality of Godhead is present before you, exhibiting anyway.
Maharaj says, to their austerities, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu enabled them to understand him to be Narayan himself.
Thank you.
From the purport.
So that's what I wanted to know, if there was some qualification on their part that enabled them, or if it was just completely out of the blue mercy that they were, the understanding was bestowed on them. So thank you.
I have a question on this.
Go ahead, Sucharadeva.
We hear in the teachings of Jayadvaita that it says Rahu Ganeta Tapsanayati na Chedya Nirvapanad Grihatva na Chandasana Vajalagni Surya Vinamahat Padar. So word comes tapasa, that the Lord cannot be understood by austerities. It comes repeatedly in scriptures. So how did Lord manifested himself by the tint of their austerity? I was not able to get it.
You going to read the comment, Surabhi Kunj?
Maharaj says, it seems Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave them some credit. They weren't sense enjoyers.
Somehow somehow by his meeting them, by them meeting him, I should say, their hearts were changed.
Maharaj says they were trying to understand the absolute truth.
Oh.
And they gave him some respect.
So they had some sincerity.
Yeah, even in their inquiry, even in their greeting, and then in their inquiry, they're asking, please explain to us. It's not the total rejection of what are you doing here, you sentimentalist. We don't even want to see you, let alone hear from you. They wanted to hear from him. When you want to hear from him, it's a kind of there's an element of humility.
Maharaj says, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself had the desire to capture the Mayavadi sannyasis.
Is that all right, Sucharadeva Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. Sucharadeva Prabhu, would you like to read the next verse?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes.
Before we move on, there's another question from
Sorry.
Actually, Saraswati Mataji has a question about how can Narayan be called Daridra Narayan because he is husband of Lakshmi Mata? Maharaj said, rhetorical question. Equals comment. Good.
And you said Mara Gupta had a question?
Comment.
Comment.
Maharaj is still typing. He says, I like Srila Prabhupada's comment.
Yeah.
That Daritra Narayan was invented. By a so-called sannyasi who did not know anything about Vedanta philosophy.
You're going to read Mara Gupta? No, that's already done. Go ahead, Sucharu Deva Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji. तोमारा वचन सुनी जुड़ाया श्रवणा तोमारा माधुरी देखी जुड़ाया नयना. Dear Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they said, to tell you the truth, we are greatly pleased to hear your words. And furthermore, your bodily features are also so pleasing that we feel extraordinary satisfaction in seeing you. Purport. In the Shastras it is said, Atah Shri Krishna Namadi na bhaved grahyam indriye sevon mukhe hi jihvadau swayam eva spuratyadaha. With one's materially contaminated senses, one cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his name, form, qualities, or paraphernalia. But if one renders service unto him, the Lord reveals himself. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-2-234. Here one can see the effects of the Mayavadi sannyasi service toward Narayana. Because the Mayavadis offered a little respect to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and because they were pious and actually followed the austere rules and regulations of sannyasa, they had some understanding of Vedanta philosophy. And by the grace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they could appreciate that he was none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is endowed with all six opulences. One of these opulences is his beauty. By his extraordinarily beautiful bodily features, the Mayavadi sannyasis recognized Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Narayana himself. He was not a farcical Narayana like the Daridra Narayanas invented by the so-called sannyasis.
It seems the answer that Maharaj gave you has been reinforced by this Bhaktivedanta purport, Sucharu Deva
Yes,
Prabhu.
yes, Prabhuji, I can see that.
Wonderful. Do you have any? Would you like to comment on this verse, Sucharu Deva Prabhu, in purport?
Certainly, what can I comment in front of you all? But what Maharaj,
Go ahead.
but just what Maharaj said a couple minutes ago, that it was some sincerity on the part of, as Krishna says, even a small sincerity can save from hellish degradation. So there was this small sincerity that the Mayavadi sannyasis had, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recognized that sincerity and reciprocated on their sincerity. So that was an important takeaway from this purport.
Yeah.
Tulsi Priya Mataji says, so the Mayavadi sannyasis were making do with each other as Narayan, but when presented with the real thing, they realized who he was.
Yeah, Lord Chaitanya's mercy. Earlier, Maharaj followed up his comment on about liking Srila Prabhupada's comment, where Prabhupada says, by a so-called sannyasi who did not know anything about Vedanta philosophy, and Maharaj says, one of the biggest names among Indian Swamijis. Prabhupada wouldn't even mention his name. Anything else on this verse? We may have time for another verse in purport, if someone's interested in reading.
Saraswati Mataji says, the Mayavadis were appreciative of the Lord's beauty, but we find some demons may see the Lord's beauty, but instead be envious of that beauty.
Yeah. Would like to read the next verse. How about you, Shar? Let's practice some nepotism. Would you like to read the next verse? Purport?
Sure. 105, right?
Yes.
Tomara prabhave sabara anandita mana kabu asangata nahe tomara vachana. Dear sir, by your influence, our minds are greatly satisfied, and we believe that your words will never be unreasonable. Therefore, you may speak on the Vedanta Sutra. Report. In this verse, the words Tomara prabhave, your influence, are very important. Unless one is spiritually advanced, he cannot influence an audience. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung, Shuddha Bhakata Charanarenu Bhajana Anukula. Unless one associates with a pure devotee, he cannot be influenced to understand devotional service. These Mayavadi sannyasis were fortunate enough to meet the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of a devotee, and certainly they were greatly influenced by the Lord. They knew that since a perfectly advanced spiritualist never says anything false, all his words are reasonable and agree with the Vedic version. A highly realized person never says anything that has no meaning. Mayavadi philosophers claim to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and this has no meaning, but Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never uttered such nonsense. The Mayavadi sannyasis were convinced about his personality, and therefore they wanted to hear the purport of Vedanta philosophy from him.
Any comment or understanding you gleaned from this verse and purport, Shara?
Well, that sentence, a highly realized person never says anything that has no meaning. I like that statement. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I remember your husband, Doug, one of the first Sanskrit terms he became familiar with was prajalpa. He got a kick out of that word. Because it certainly seemed to him early on as he was reading that, yeah, the world is full of nonsense talks. Prajalpa.
Murari Gupta Prabhu says, I'm still confused over why the Mayavadis think Narayan is a real person. No,
Maybe
the initial question was, I don't understand who Narayan is according to Mayavadis. He shouldn't exist.
Oh, I see what you're saying. They're addressing each other as Namo Narayan. Oh. You want to read that, Surabhi Kunj?
Mara says, semi-real person. Personality is ultimately false.
Mm.
But every person is a manifestation of Brahman.
Mm. Go ahead.
And the sannyasi has realized himself to be Brahman.
Realized in asterisks.
So he is now as good as God, Narayan.
Mhm. All right. Looks like we've come.
And
Right,
according to
okay.
some political social rhetoric, the poor man should also be recognized as a manifestation of God. Poor but God. So Daridra Narayan.
Does that mean there's a corresponding Daridra Lakshmi?
Euphemism carried to the realm of the absolute.
I have a question about that.
Oh, and Maharaj continues, like here in India, the disabled are called Divyanga,
Huh.
endowed with divine limbs.
Hmm.
Could I ask a question about that?
Sure, go ahead.
I was just wondering if that was in any way influenced by Christianity, because in Christianity we have the example of Lord Jesus Christ saying, when I was hungry, you gave me to eat, and when I was thirsty, you gave me to drink, meaning that, you know, what's the other saying? Whatsoever you do to the least of these, you do unto me. So since the Christians take Jesus to be God, their idea of serving God is when you serve the poor, you serve God. So I'm wondering if that had some influence on that kind of thinking. And also the idea, you know, to use the example of Divyanga, that those who are born crippled or you know, malformed or with severe challenges, that they're especially favored by God. They're manifestations to invoke our mercy and compassion, God's love and mercy and compassion in caring for these, because they're also the least of us. So they're representatives of God. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of influence from Christianity there, because in terms of karma, if you're crippled or you're poor, that's your bad karma and you've been shunned. You know, you're shunned because you have bad karma and you deserve your fate. So I'm just wondering about if there's any possible connection there.
Maharaj says, origin of a mental concoction, subject for a doctoral thesis.
I'm not sure what the mental concoction is. You're saying the idea that the poor and the disabled are manifestations of God. Is that the mental concoction? Or the idea that it's related to Christianity somehow? Oh, that you're saying that they're taken to be literally Narayan. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Not merely manifestation, but they're God. And origin equals Christianity. Who knows? Okay, thank you. Yeah, it might be good for a doctoral thesis because I'd like to know. The question from Suchara Prabhu. Suchara Deva Prabhu.
He says, if the personality is ultimately false and Brahman is ultimately quality less, how is the Brahman of Mayavadis different from the Shunya of Voidists?
Not much difference.
Maharaj says hardly different.
All right, I think we've reached the end of our time, plus a few minutes. Oh.
Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called the impersonalists covered Buddhists.
All right. Who will do the honors of concluding this class with chanting of the holy names? Are there any volunteers?
I nominate Suchara Prabhu.
That's a good idea. There's a new voice. Suchara Dev Prabhu, would you like to chant Hare Krishna to close out our class? We chant for maybe three to 5 minutes.
Okay, so am I supposed to chant continuously?
Yeah, simply chant Hare Krishna continuously. It's the Zoom manifestation of Harinam Sankirtan. We will join in our own way, offline.
Oh. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshetarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद कृष्ण कृपाश्रय मूर्ति अभय चरणारविंद भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस श्रील भक्त सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर प्रभुपाद की जय। नामाचार्य श्री हरदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से बोलो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि श्री गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय। नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। गंगा माई यमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी महारानी की जय। समवेत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू असेंबल डिवोटीज हरे कृष्णा। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू असेंबल डिवोटीज हरे कृष्णा। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू असेंबल डिवोटीज हरे कृष्णा। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।
Jai. Thank you so much, Sucharadeva Prabhu. And thank you everyone for being here for Sri Caitanya Caritamrta with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends. Sri Caitanya Caritamrta ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends ki jai.
Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki.
Jai.